Dear students of class 9, welcome to this online video class. In this and in the upcoming videos, you will be learning the first chapter of history in the social science, that is the French Revolution. The French Revolution. In this particular video, part 1, I will be explaining you the introduction of the chapter and the main causes of the French Revolution. Introduction. French Revolution started in the year 1789, that is in the 18th century. The series of events started by the middle class shaken the upper classes. You will be learning what is middle class, what is upper class, etc. in this class. The series of events means those events like protests, rallies, destructions and demolitions, etc., which led the revolution of France. The word revolution means a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system which emphasizes liberty, fraternity and equality. You know, fraternity means brotherhood. In France, the monarchy system was existing before the revolution, and the common people were harassed or tortured in many ways, especially by imposing heavy taxes and the workload. Monarchy, you must be knowing, monarchy means a form of government with a monarch, which means a king at the head. King is ruling the government, king is ruling the country. Regime means a system or order. The people revolted against the cruel regime or order or the system of monarchy means people protested or revolted against the cruel system of king. And gradually this revolution put forward the ideas of liberty, fraternity and equality, which means all are equal. No one has the privileges by birth, except freedom is the birthright of all, but no other privileges by birth. Now these ideals inspired the middle class people who were educated, and ultimately it led to the democratic government in France. The revolution began on 14th July 1789. Remember this date. The French Revolution began on 14th July 1789 with the storming of the fortress prison, or with the demolition of the fortress prison, the Bastille. Now Bastille means the fortress prison was hated by all, because it stood for the despotic power of the king, and this fortress was demolished on 14th July, and thus the revolution of France started on that day. So now you know the meaning of Bastille. Bastille means a fortress in Paris used as a prison. It was built around in the 14th century and destroyed on 1749 or on 14th July 1789. In other words, Bastille means any prison or jail. So the destruction of demolition of Bastille fortress is the starting point of the French Revolution. Causes of the French Revolution. Dear students, now let us learn what are the main causes that led to the French Revolution. There are three main causes. They are social cause, economic cause and the political cause. First, the social cause. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. The society of France was divided into three estates or classes. First class, or the first estate, second estate, and the third estate. First estate, as you see in the picture there, it was of clergy, means the group of persons involved in the church matters like priests. They were in the first estate or the first class. The second estate, as you see there in the picture, they were nobility, means the persons who have high rank in the state administrations like the kings, queens, nobles of sword, princes of royal blood, dukes, knights, etc. And the third state comprises of the big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, landless laborers, servants, poor people, etc. So this was the third estate. First two classes or the two estates were exempted from paying taxes. They enjoyed privileges by birth. Therefore, that enjoying of the privileges by birth was called as feudal privileges. The special rights that were enjoyed by birth. The phrase feudal privileges was coined in France and enjoyed by the clergy and the rich. They used to enjoy a collection of taxes from the poor and the downtrodden. Only the members of the third estate had to pay the taxes to the state, not the first and the second estate. The direct tax, there was so-called direct tax, which was called as taille, and also a number of indirect taxes which were charged on articles of everyday consumptions like salt or tobacco. Taille means a tax imposed on the common people by the king, or imposed by the king on the third estate people. There was also another type of tax called tithe, collected by the church from the peasants. Tithe means 1/10 of annual produce or 1/10 of annual income or earnings, formerly taken as tax for the support of the church and clergy. So two types of tax. One was taille, that was direct tax, and another was the tithe, which was collected by the church. Now this is very important. The clergy and the nobility, the first estate and the second estate, were only 10% of the population, only 10%, but around 60, but possessed 60% of lands. They were rich, they had a big property, but they were only 10%. The third estate was around 90% of the population, but they had possessed only 40% of the lands. Therefore, the first and the second estate people were extremely rich, and the third estate people were quite poor or extremely poor. The second important cause was economic cause. There was a subsistence crisis of food grains in France. The population of France rose from about 23 million in the year 1715 to 28 million in the year 1789. Within a short period of time, the population of France increased quite extremely. This increased the demand for the food grains. However, the production could not keep pace with the demand, which ultimately increased the prices of the food grains. Most workers work as laborers in the workshops, and they didn't see increase in their wages too. Situation became worse whenever drought or hail reduced the harvest, and the poor people went hungry, and the king and the first estate people never cared for the third estate people. Now this led to the scarcity of food grains, and or in other words, it is called a subsistence crisis, which started occurring frequently during the old regime. Thus, the scarcity of food grains under the monarchy system led the people to revolt against or to protest against the king. The third very important cause is the political cause. The famous king Louis XVI came into power in 1774, and he found that the France treasury was empty. Before he could come to power in France, the France had already undergone long years of war which had drained the financial resources of France. Under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy Britain, which added more than $1 billion livres to a debt that had already risen to more than 2 billion livres. Livres means an old French monetary unit. In India we call rupees. Thus, the war and also the help of the King Louis XVI to American colonies added more financial burden to France. There was also a palace called the Palace of Versailles. It was an extravagant fort which required immense money to maintain. Added to this, France also found difficult to meet its regular expenses such as the cost of maintaining an army, the court, running the government offices or universities, and this forced the state to increase the taxes. So dear students, all these financial burdens were imposed on the common people by imposing the taxes of different types. Thus, these three causes, the social cause, economic cause, and the political cause, which are the three main causes for the French Revolution. We will continue the chapter in the next video, part 2.